would you like to introduce yourself?
Well, my name is Todd, and yeah, I live in Wyoming, in the middle of nowhere, and I do art for films, mostly films and TV shows, different kind of narrative projects mostly, um, and I've lived for the last 20 years mostly in Thailand. I've worked a lot in Asia, worked in Europe quite a bit, mostly Denmark and Ireland, working with Cartoon Saloon. Um, I've just been sort of a freelance art director, designer. So I've kind of worked just wherever, wherever they ask me to come. So one of my early philosophies when I started out in animation was the project either has to be really interesting or it has to be in an interesting place. So that's how my career has sort of uh, been developed. So,
I actually have a quick question before you get started.
sure.
I was looking through a lot of your work and your portfolio and on your Instagram, and I noticed that you pick a lot of projects from different cultures and you take
Yes.
inspiration from different cultures. Do those projects request those specific cultures from you, or do you use those cultures as inspiration for your art?
It's a really weird thing because all throughout my career I've been asked to work on projects that had cultural either cultural influences or were set in a particular culture. Like when my work with Jorge Gutierrez on his work, um, usually he's from Mexico City, so all of his stuff is sort of about Mexico and set in kind of that setting. And the same with the Irish stuff. It's all set in Ireland and uses a lot of motifs from Irish Celtic art. On Secret of Kells, we took liberally from the like the Book of Kells, the Book of Durham, a lot of those illuminated manuscripts. But when I started out, my very first job was at Warner Brothers. My first big job after I got out of Cal. I went to school at Cal Arts up in Santa Clarita, and when I graduated, I began working with Chuck Jones and Maurice Noble. They were doing Looney Tunes, and I didn't expect to get the job. I applied, but I didn't have any cartoons in my portfolio. And what my student films have been about, I lived in Koreatown in Los Angeles, and with a Korean family. It's a long story, but so a lot of my early student films were about that Korean American experience, especially in the early 20th century, with migrant workers and things like that. And so I had a lot of influences from different cultures, Korean culture, black and white woodcuts from the 1930s and 40s. And when I got to Warner Brothers, Maurice Noble, the art director, he looked at my stuff, and it was stuff that he had been influenced by. So I don't know if they even run Looney Tunes anymore, but
Not too often. I
not
think
too often. Yeah,
the only time that I've really seen it, aside from you scouting it out, was or for animation projects, is really in Six Flags or at
okay,
theme
all
parks.
right,
They do
sure,
in theme parks.
sure. But so the old Looney Tunes with Bugs Bunny and Daffy Duck, his influences were Mexican culture. His uncle had been a missionary in Thailand and had sent him batiks and all kinds of textiles and things like that. So that had really influenced his art style. So he incorporated a lot of that stuff into his own work, into his professional work. And when he saw my work, he recognized there was some kind of commonality, if that makes sense. So my very first assignment at Warner Brothers was not making a Looney Tune, but it was to pick a culture and study its art forms. So I worked with a tribe out of Seattle, Washington, called the people of the Upper Skagit River, Northwest Coast natives. And I used a lot of their icons. I worked with some of their artists and their elders and I wrote a story based on one of their characters. And so that became my project, and it was my training ground. And then from then on, Maurice and I and a couple of my friends developed a company called Noble Tales, and we were basically exploring the world. We went to Indonesia to study with a shadow puppet master in Indonesia. We went to Turkey and studied, we just went to a lot of places and studied different types of storytelling and different types of visual storytelling. People tell stories even in a carpet, right? In Turkey, they might have a whole story there, just in the way they design their themes. And that's from there I was helping design a show called Happily Ever After for HBO, which was also set in different cultures. And I went to school with Jorge Gutierrez, and I tried to bring into our Noble Tales project with Maurice, I tried to bring in different people from different cultures to help design different folk tales from these different places. So, we surrounded ourselves with these people that loved folk art and loved folk tales. And so it's from then on, I got to, Jorge's career took off, and he hired me to come in, and I had, just, it's just a weird thing. It was never planned. It just happened that way, really.
It sounds so amazing that you got this amazing opportunity at such a young age.
I'm so blessed, so fortunate. Yeah.
How would you recommend we go about research for when writing or making art for specific projects outside of the Americanized culture, the modern day? Because we have access to the internet now, so maybe.
Sure.
But I'm not too sure how you feel about using the internet to study up on different.
Well, see all these books? I bought all these books to. I've got walls and walls of books before the internet, right? And this was my research library, so I had an edge on a lot of the other designers. Now everybody has access, right? So I use these sometimes, but I still go to Google, right? So it's wonderful that we can access these things. And also, a lot of the projects, we've actually been able to talk to experts from these cultures. It's easy enough to reach out, and the project I'm on now is called 21 Martyrs. It's set in Egypt and Libya, and so I've been working with iconographers from Egypt, and I just reached out and emailed them, and they gave me a crash course in iconography, for example. You couldn't have done that 25 years ago, you know what I mean? But my approach to research and design is still the same, and it was what Maurice taught me. And basically what I would do is, and what I do, that's not a good, I go through the research material, whether it's in a book form or in Google, and I will go through and I'll try to pick out the most outstanding characteristics, if that makes sense. So I don't know if I can share my screen here. Yeah, I can. Okay. Is that okay? Oh, host.
Yes, that is definitely okay. Oh, well, I think I have to give permission for that.
Yeah.
Sorry,
okay.
Guys, I set this up last minute.
No worries.
Hi, in the meantime, I just had a question. So,
Sure.
I'm a really big fan of the animation style in Song of the Sea and Secret of Puff. And I know you worked on that a little bit. And I was just wondering, I guess, what kind of did you were you mainly focusing on the multicultural aspect of that as well?
Yeah, it was very, very important. It was important to Tom Moore, the director, because he'd grown up in that culture. So you'll notice that in a lot of the forest shots. That's actually what I was going to show you here real quick. Hold on just a second. Here we go.
You're all right. I'm not too sure if you're sharing. Oh, okay. Now I can see it.
Can you see it? Okay, sorry. So this is let me see this. color script. More. Okay, so I didn't set this up too good either. These were stills from Secret of Kells, and all right. I don't know if you guys can see this.
We can, yes.
Okay, so this is from the Book of Kells, and this is basically how I handle all the research and what we did in particular on the Secret of Kells. So, can anyone tell me what the design language is, what the design motif is, just in simple terms? If I have a brave volunteer.
I mean, I know the Secret of Kells was focused on Irish culture and that sort of thing, but yeah, I'm not entirely familiar with it. Yeah.
So what we tried to do is to break this down into a visual language, and what I mean by that is what makes the picture look like the picture. So we noticed that we have blocks of, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but blocks of a lot of detail, right, in certain areas, and then areas that are free of detail, the negative space. So you'll have this, like this angel, right? And it's got a lot of detail, but it's got a very specific shape. So it's the design language would be very specific shapes with a lot of detail in them. And it took a while for them to get to that. This Secret of Kells, I don't know if you guys know, was their college project. So they were.
Oh, really? Was this Cal Arts?
No, they were in Ireland. So they went to a school called Ballyferma, and so Nora Twomey, Ross Stewart, Tom Moore, a couple of others. They formed a company, but they wanted to make this film about the Book of Kells. And so, these are from the Book of Kells and the Book of Durham. So you see it's the same language, right? This block, graphic block with a lot of detail in there. Same with this. There's, and it's defined by these negative shapes, right? And then, of course, some of the pages are just purely ornamental, right? But all these things symbolize, these things symbolize the Trinity, the Holy Spirit, the Father, Son, the Holy Ghost, basically. So in Celtic culture, they wouldn't have that, but these were the Gospels that the monks were making. These were made by the Irish monks on Iona, and that's what they think. So all these symbols meant something to them. To us, they just look ornamental, but that was the code we had to kind of break. Again, here's a block of a lot of detail. A block of a lot of detail. So if we look at the, let's see. This is Ross Stewart. He was the art director. This is some of his personal work. He's a brilliant artist. And he can paint super realistically, but this is what he was doing at that time. Can you see some of a parallel between his work and some of the stuff from the Book of Kells and the Book of Durham? So for example, blocks of a lot of texture or detail.
And then some without, yeah.
Right. So he already was doing that naturally, whether it was because he was looking, and some of this is in the Celtic stuff too, the much older Celtic art. It just sort of got transferred into what the monks were doing on the illuminated manuscripts. But Ross is brilliant. And so he was, let's see. So this was some of the first pitch work. This is when they were still trying to raise money. So this was their first, they were funded partially by the Irish government when they got out of school to try to develop this. This is way back in 2004. But even in this, do you see, this is one of Tom Moore's drawings. But can you see the parallel between this and the Book of Kells, where you have a block with just all this detail in it, right?
I'm looking at the images now and I can see it.
Yeah. So if I hadn't told you, maybe you wouldn't think about it. But this is how I approach design on any project. And what you try to do is, what I do is, if you take images directly from the internet, you'll be copying, right? It won't have, some people can do it, I can't, have a spark of originality to it. And so what we did in this case is we actually looked at what the art language was. So we took that description, blocks of detail, blocks of ornamental texture, and juxtaposed that with the negative space. That became the most outstanding characteristics of the illuminated manuscripts. And then we could apply that directly to what we were creating in the artwork we were creating. So this was one of the early ones. This is before it had really been defined. So it's beginning to look a little like The Secret of Kells, but not really. It's too busy, right? They hadn't quite.
I see it's too, with all that everywhere. It's
Yeah.
so different.
Yeah, it had. So later on, they learned to focus this. Once they got the language really down, we learned to focus. Like certain areas would have that detail, whether it was the chemistry set that that they were working with, or the forest. Here's it's getting closer where we have this block that's the desk that they're working on, right? Filled with detail. And then this is, it's basically negative space, in the forest, right? Just this block of detail, and then a big block of negative space. So you can see how the language would be important. And I think you can do that on any project, even on the Mexican stuff with Jorge's stuff. Like the Book of Life, we based a lot of the stuff. That was a challenging project because we had Mayan culture, we had Incan culture, we had Aztec culture, we had Spanish colonial culture, we had more modern, like a mixture of stuff. And he wanted to incorporate all of that stuff. And the older the stuff was on the buildings, it would change cultures, which is really interesting. So I don't know.
When you're incorporating all those different cultures, how do you guys settle on? That must take so much conversation. How many people were working on the concept art for that project?
For Book of Life?
Yes, for Book of Life.
I think there were about seven of us or so. And I can show you what I was working on here. Oops, I just lost my. Hold on. And I don't know if I went through that pretty quickly, but I don't know if there was any other questions about any of that you saw there. Let's see.
Does that answer your question, Zeke?
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it.
Sure, no problem. Just trying to find.
I just wanted to comment and say that I think it's pretty cool that you worked. You're inspired from like Korean American culture.
Oh, sure, yeah.
That means a lot. It's pretty cool.
Well, and I taught for a year at the National University in Korea of the Arts, and that was a great experience there. Just working with the young artists there. It was some incredible talent. That was it. My wife. Korea was a bit too cold.
Yeah, it tends to be pretty cold there.
But Wyoming, I don't know. Wyoming's pretty cold too. So, sorry, just a second. I'm looking for. I had retinal surgery. I blew an eye like a month or two ago, and.
Oh no, I wasn't gonna ask, so I wasn't sure, but.
Hey, I'm practicing for Halloween. No.
I know. I was about to ask if that was a Halloween look.
No, I've just had some problems with my eye, and.
Becoming a real pirate.
That's right.
It seems.
Hold on.
be all right. If I were to ask you a question, would that distract you?
No, not at all.
All right. So how would you recommend pitching an idea?
Okay. For a TV show or a
Hmm,
feature, or
Um,
because it's different. Each one is a little bit different.
I would say for a TV show is probably a good place to start.
Okay. I think well, of course the idea is the most important thing, right? Yeah, I have some pitches here actually. So I don't know. Sorry, I really got lost here. So this was a pitch Bible. No, I wasn't involved in this project, but I love it. I love the project. This is, I don't know if you guys have seen Puffin Rock.
No,
So
I
this
haven't
is
heard
a-
of it.
Yeah, this is a show that they made at Cartoon Saloon, and it's about these little puffins. And I think the biggest thing is being clear about your idea in your pitch. You got to know who your audience is, right? So here they knew it was going to be preschool animation, and if you're going for a network, you have to have certain amount of number of short films, like the episodes. On the streamers, it's a little bit easier because it's a little bit more, you know, you can have if you have 3 episodes. That's what Jorge did with his last Maya and the Three, I think, for Netflix. He had, I don't know, 5, I can't remember, 5 or 6 episodes, which wouldn't have been able to work on TV, but because it was a streamer, you know. So where you pitch is also very important, because you have to know what their formats are and what kind of things they're looking for, right? So can you guys see that okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so basically, and we start with a description of who the show is for and where it's set and why people would want to watch it, right? This is packed with exciting adventures and lots of laughs. Puffin Rock will spark the imaginations of our young viewers. The less words you can use, the better. You know, you have to just be very concise, very precise about your descriptions, so that and they designed this to feel more like a children's book brought to life in a way, with the textures and things like that. It's very, very kid friendly. And this was the teen Puffin Penguin books, this Cartoon Saloon, and different companies that were involved, and they had their confirmed broadcasters. So if you can get a broadcaster involved, and a lot of times what they'll do with a broadcaster is they may love your show idea, so they'll give you a little bit of money to develop it further, and just to see what it'll become. So this is Puffin Rock. You get a sense of what the world is going to be like. You know, just what kind of adventures they're going to have. The main
Feels
character.
almost
Pip.
like a book. Is this inspired by a book?
No, this is an original concept, but I think that they made a deal with Penguin Books. Now, I could be wrong, but I think they made a deal with Penguin Books very early. So they were actually making books for this before the show or in parallel with the show. I'm not exactly sure. Again, I wasn't involved with this project, but it was happening while I was there at the studio. But I loved the show, and you know, all the artists are good friends of mine, and I just love what they were doing. So
Yeah, I thought I'd ask because there's somebody else who's in this call who happened to see Poria, who they're working on a project right now, and I thought it was pitch worthy from what I've seen. So
okay.
I thought it would help.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, just going through the, you know, secondary characters, some of the bad guys, you know, some of the situations and that they might be in with these bad guys, right? And this is all based on biology, on real things, that, you know, real relationships between the animals. But they've made characters of them. So it's a brilliant show, and it's you know, what is the design language of this? You know, soft shapes, right? Purer color, lots of texture, all the things that you would find in a children's book. So by defining what the design style is, what the design language is, you can bring your team in, and you know, they can follow a certain design look. So these are some of the episodes that they proposed, and then usually you would write a script, like a sample script. That's usually very important, because they may love the art, but if they don't like the stories, if they don't like the basic story concepts, then they won't be interested.
Do they usually attach them to the pitch sides, or do you sell that separately?
It's usually separate. Yeah, I have done pitches with scripts attached, but usually it's separate. And in this case, you know, one of the questions that the broadcasters had was, well, all of these stories take place on an island. What kind of adventures can they have? It's just one location, right? So they created this page to show, well, actually, there's a cove, there's these sand dune areas, there's a lighthouse, there's a kelp forest under the water, there's a seagull cliff. So they wanted to show that this was a really rich world, even though it was just a single island. And then they got Chris O'Dowd. He's well known in Ireland. So if they attached like a well-known actor, voice person, you know, it just helps sell the project. Yeah, that's right. They said, well, if this did take off, would you be interested? And he goes, yeah, that'd be great, you know. And then he was involved. So anyway, so I don't know if that's helpful at all, but
no, it's definitely helpful. It's nice to see something to reference at least, because I often see a lot of pitches get a little too wordy. So this is a good example of what to do.
Right. And so if you might show this to a broadcaster, for example, and then they'll go, wow, we really like this. Maybe you could make like an episode, or you could make like a little 1 or 2 minutes just to show what the world might be like, right? So you might make something like, and I don't know what the sound is going to be like on this, but you can see some of the pictures. Actually, just...
Even from this, you see a lot of the personality of the characters coming out.
Yeah.
So. Did they get approved from this pitch?
Yeah, they're making the feature now. They've made 3 seasons, and then they're making a feature.
Oh, yay.
So it's pretty successful for the studio. And, you know, the environments are a major character in the show as well. And they wanted to highlight that.
Artwork is beautiful.
You should let the creators know that you're a big fan so you can work with them on their next work.
Anyway, so I hope that's interesting. But that's the kind of thing that you would produce if you know, if they like it and they want to go to the next stage. And so it depends on the broadcaster. Sometimes they'll say, just do an animatic, just do a storyboard to show us what it might be like. You know, Nickelodeon does that a lot on some of the, like El Tigre, some of the stuff that Jorge's pitched. done just storyboards basically. Yeah.
I'm not sure if anyone else has a question, but if you'd like to ask, I have a couple more. So
Okay.
But I will say that we are, sadly, because it's Zoom, we'll be ending in 5 minutes, so we'll have to rejoin.
Okay.
Hopefully you don't lose too many people from that, but just come back in if you guys get kicked out. And I wanted to ask, how do you choose the colors that you work with? Because your colors are always so vibrant and just, it shows so much mood. So I'm just curious how you figure that out.
Well, I think it depends on the project. So, of course, color is it's the strongest visual relationship you have with an audience emotionally, right? So, just like music is the strongest emotional connection you have in film, and color is the strongest visual emotional connection. So it's really important, and I approach it a lot of different ways. Sometimes I'll do it psychologically, or with themes. So sometimes we delve into what psychologists say about color, like red being the color of fire and blood and all these things. And in particular cultures, that has a lot of power. And a lot of the projects that I've been designing on, certain colors do have certain meanings in particular cultures. Like red, for example, in South Africa is a color for death, I think. And white in Japan is death, right? They use it for funerals and things like that. So it just depends on the context sometimes. Like on LT Gray, we might use LT Gray's color is green when he becomes a little superhero. And so when he's becoming stronger, we'll echo his color more throughout a palette, right? Or if in the villain, they might be magenta. So as they're winning, we might echo that. There's a lot of different ways to use color. And I think if you set, like on The Secret of Kells, we used green to represent the ink, and black and red was for the Vikings. And we tried to keep that consistent. So as the Vikings came and attacked Kells and where the monks were, we included more of those grays and more of those blacks and more of those reds of the fire and things like that. In the forest, of course, was more natural. It was more like greens and golds and browns, and we tried to contrast that against the more stark colors of where the buildings were that were made of stone, just to try to build more contrast between those things. So again, it just depends on context, I think. I don't know if that answers your question, but
it does. I kind of remember this vaguely from one of my classes, so
okay. And I often use like color harmonies. So if we have the color wheel, I'll use certain, like a complementary scheme a lot or split complementary, where you'll have one color on one side and like a theme from the other, where it's very specific about the color range that you use. Like that works really well for young kids shows, because it is very vibrant, but it also has enough of a range to be interesting. It's very sincere, and just like the Jorge's stuff with I don't know if you know Jorge's work. Jorge Gutierrez, he did the Book of Life, he did Maya and the Three for Netflix, but he's a bigger than life character. He's also this super genius, and he's just like, when I'm designing color for him, he goes, I want to smell the yellows, they're so hot. And I want to feel the fire of the reds. So he wants me to crank up all the colors full blast to make it. That's how he sees Mexico, right? So it's difficult to balance all that stuff. We're talking about color design. I mean, wow, but it works, and he can do it. The thing is I have to do it because he can do it easily. right? With his concept. So if he can do it, I should be able to do it, right? So as a challenge, but
That's fascinating. The way they just like see that vision and just like see the execution and just like the way it translates to the artist, that they can just see what the creative director sees.
Yeah.
Which is very interesting.
Well, in Jorge's stories, the story he tells, it's him, right? They're bigger than life stories. They're intense stories, but he also has this really soft side as well that he contrasts that with. And he's a lovely man. You know, he's one of the funniest guys I've ever known. So he gets all those things in there, you know. So I think being sincere in your artwork is really important, whether it's a game, whether you know, even your commercial artwork. I do a lot of commercials, but I still try to instill a lot of my experiences. You know, I spent the last 20 years in Thailand, and those sneak in there just sort of organically. I don't plan it. It just is. It's become part of me, and so even on the on some of the stuff for Jorge, goes, you know, that's looking a little Asian, Tod. You know, so you know, he can see it. You know, so and I like, oh right, you know, and then I'll pull back and pull it back to be more Mexican. So yeah.
I hate to move away from that, but I did want to ask about the noble approach, because I've had that referred to in one of my classes before, and I was wondering, what do you hope that readers can learn from the book?
Well, you know, the noble approach was a very special project because it was started by my mentor, Maurice Noble, when he had started writing notes for it way back when he was on Snow White and before. So way back in the 1930s when he was at Disney, he was working on Fantasia, then he worked at Warner Brothers through the 50s and all these experiences. And when he hired us, he found out we didn't know anything. We thought we knew everything, right? We were going to take over the world with our art design, but on our first day, we learned that we didn't know anything. So he started taking us through the steps of how he approached art design. And a lot of the stuff that I'm talking about, you know, that I've been talking about in the last few minutes, this is all from him. You know, I've tweaked it and adapted it to what I do, to my way of working, but really that's what's in the book. And I think it's not only about, you know, there's a lot of art books, and there's a lot of books that might even be better about color or design, but how Maurice combined those things together is very special. And I think, you know, the things that were important to him were sincerity, were originality, were getting yourself on the screen or in your work. And that's the kind of things that he talks about, and how he combines those different aspects of design. So that's the thing that he hoped that readers would find from the book, is that they would be actually freed to be a bit more original, to take some risks, and to you know, be true to themselves, basically. I don't know if that's a good answer, but that's that's what I think he hoped, and what I tried. Because how the book came, he was working on it, and his eyesight had gotten so bad that he started dictating notes to me. And then he got sick, and we knew he was going to die, and he said, look, if anything happens to me, promise me that you'll finish this book. And so I said, oh, sure, of course, you know, you're not going to die. Then he died. So, but I thought he would live. He promised he'd live to 100, and I think he would have, but anyway, so it's another long story. But so I did. I worked on it, and you know, I interviewed people he'd worked with. He'd written a lot of notes for me. He helped me on my film at Cal Arts. You know, just kind of taking me through his steps. And so I tried to incorporate that all in there. Lessons from the Noble Tales, lessons from our trips that we took studying with these different, you know, in these different locations. So all of that stuff is in there. And I tried to give the readers a real sense of who Maurice is. again, just following his philosophy and putting myself in there as well. We were kindred spirits in a lot of ways. So
it's nice that his ideas get to live through you. And
oh yeah, he was the best. Such a beautiful person. I mean, you know, he had passion for his work, and there's a lot of stories of why. One of the things that drove his work with the Looney Tunes especially is during the World War II, his wife had left him and basically kidnapped their daughters. This is how he told it. So he wasn't able to, he lost connection with them, and he knew the greatest connection he had was through the Looney Tunes, because they would show in the theaters before the movies. So he designed his butt off. He knew those little short films became a love letter to his two daughters. And so he killed himself on those. He put all of his heart in those he could try to reach out through that screen to his family, and hoping that they would come back. And eventually when they were adults, they did. But that was one of the main drivers of his early career, you know.
Yeah. Oh, I never knew that was what the Looney Tunes was about.
Well, as far as the art style, that's why he put so much passion into it. And Chuck Jones too. I mean, he was the best. You know, he was amazing at timing, at story, at posing, all these things. So it just, you know, there were a lot of special things happening on those shorts, the best ones anyway. So
yeah, I think that ideology of, you know, remembering this day in original and bring out importance of your own stories is something that's often forgotten in the game industry, because it's mainly about money and shooter games, because that's what makes money. But there's also those magical stories which are shown every once in a while. Like a story that just came out, I'm not sure if you've heard of it, it's called It Takes Two, that won an award recently. Great game.
I'll check it out.
Yeah, it's fantastic, and it's very original in what it does in bringing together two people to play it together, to experience it together, but also in the way it tells stories, which is they care about the art. I think you would like it.
I'll check it out. Was it Take Two, or It Takes Two?
It is called It Takes Two.
Okay, It Takes Two. Okay.
Actually they were started with like the EA, and their first game was A Way Out. Their whole concept of their gaming is based on the couch co-op, which, I mean, the one that I think like people around my age, they grew up with, like 80s and stuff. You just have your like brother or friend over and just like playing on one console and one TV.
Yeah.
Like that, all the teasing and poking and everything, and the combination of the experience of you just playing together, just that's social experience and activity. So their vision of this company so far has been like this, focusing on that. So their first project was A Way Out. It was like a two-prisoner, and actually I played that with my roommate, and it was so fun.
That's cool.
Like there was like a time, because it was a story like heavy, kind of. I mean, not that heavy, but was like engaging, let's say. So, and then like he was like one of the like prisoner, I was the other one. We have to just work together in like section of the level to just pass. So the whole thing was like very interesting.
That's cool. A couple of my students, they created the game Subway Surfers, and they were over in Denmark. I teach at Denmark usually like once a year. But when he was in school, he opened up his own, just to get a little extra money, he opened up a little skate shop, basically, with skater clothes, and that was what he was about. And it just sort of like, you know, he just designed what he knew, right? And so anyway, it was just interesting to see how that all went. And, interesting guys. They're really fun guys.
That's really cool that your students were that's such a huge mobile game.
Yeah.
Speaking of games, have you ever wanted to work within the game industry, or have you before?
I have. I've only worked on one game, actually. It was, now I can't think of the name of it. It was a pirate game. It was an older game, but they were redoing it and making an updated version of it, but they were making it a 2D again. And this was probably 10 years ago or so. Oh gosh,
Monkey Island, something.
Monkey Island. That was it. So I helped design some of the settings. I did some concepts for the updated version. I don't remember which one. I think there's a lot of different iterations of that now. But yeah, I was just, and so I was living in Thailand at the time. So I was trying to bring in different aspects of that, not so much culturally, but as far as the shape language of nature, things like that. So, and looking at the original game and trying to be faithful to certain, again, looking at what the design motifs were, what the design language was, and then transferring that to the updated version so that it would have the sort of connection to it,
It really goes to show how many people try to go right into the industry, but it's good for artists to move around because everything applies to both.
Well, even, anything you do, and I tell this to my students as well, if you do things outside of art, the more experiences you have outside of art is going to make your art better. So if you're traveling, if you're looking at stuff, if you're going to museums, if you're reading a book, even having, spending time with your family. I know artists a lot of times don't. You know what I mean? They love their families, but they're focused on what they do. But, all those stories and all those things even affect your design. It's all linked, Oops, can't hear you there.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, okay.
I forgot to press the button.
That's okay.
Let's see. I'm trying to see if I have another important question before we run out of time.
I have a question.
Oh, yes.
Well, I haven't seen this Prodigal, the project of yours, which you're like the writer, producer, director, technically like Bugs Bunny in that the playing baseball field, so like wearing all the hats. I just want to know your experience, like how does it feel, like how does it work with just wearing multiple hats?
Well, honestly, I've always had a short film on the side. So even though I'm working at the studios and things like that, I always have my own personal shorts because I think, well, one thing, I never get completely satisfied with the things at the studio. Some amazing projects, of course, but there's also other things that I'm interested in exploring, other stories or other styles or other things. For example, in The Prodigal, I was working with learning from iconographers in the Ukraine. And there's a school in Lviv especially, where there's a teacher named Lubia Yatskiv. She's the most amazing artist. Just her shape language and her color and her design is incredible. She was too busy to talk to me, so I picked the brains of all of her students. And I learned so much, and I was able to incorporate those things into my own work, and I felt like I was really growing as an artist in a way that I probably wouldn't have at the studio, right? Just like 21 Martyrs now, I'm working with Egyptian iconographers, and I'm calling up my friends in Lviv as well, in Ukraine, although it's a little difficult right now, but anyway, I try to like find an aspect that I want to strengthen in myself, or I have a strong interest in, and try to pull that into my work. So I'm always growing as an artist, because if you're not growing as an artist, you're going to be pretty miserable, I think, unless there's other outlets in your life somewhere, And again, that's just my opinion. I could be completely wrong, but it works.
I think
works
you're totally
for me.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a really good reminder, because I'm not primarily an artist. I'm primarily a writer. So
Okay.
It's a good reminder to try to go past just my writing style
In your comfort
challenge
zone.
myself. Yes,
That's
my
right.
comfort zone.
Yeah.
So that's a really good reminder. And I was wondering where we could watch that, because I saw the pictures on Instagram, and I also really was interested in it, and I was wondering where we could watch it.
Well, which one?
The Prodigal Son, I believe.
Oh, yeah, The Prodigal. It's on 37stories.com. So it was an interesting project because I had to design it, and it's designed because the people that I was working with, I got partnered with a friend, and they're language translators. So they wanted to put this in as many languages as possible. And so I had to design it so that, like Arabic takes a lot longer to say something a lot of times than English. So I had to design it that it would fit all these different languages.
How many languages did you have to factor in?
Well, we're up to 70 or 80 now, I think. I don't remember. But... So, trying to cut away at the right moment so that when they're speaking, it doesn't feel strange, and put enough pauses in, but you don't want it to be paused too long so that it feels strange. I think in some places in the English version there are those pauses, but I tried to work around it. It was a fun challenge,
Yeah, I don't know how you work around that or how you test it if you don't know all the languages.
Well, you go for the longest one and the shortest one. The longest one you can find and the shortest one, and you just try to factor that in.
And you didn't have like people who are specialized in those, who knew those languages, working on the project as well?
I did, yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, that was the beauty of the internet, is I could reach out and ask them to translate the the English version, and because it was the Bible, I mean, those versions exist already. They're just out there. You can just find them on the internet. So, but I had friends that would read it, things like that.
All right, I will definitely check it out because I'm very excited for that one.
Yeah, it was a fun experiment, and I always wanted to do like a cutout style. So again, I brought students over from Denmark, from the animation workshop in Denmark, over to Thailand, and they interned with me, and we created the characters and stuff there. And then we animated it in Indonesia at a studio called Max Studio. So, and I never know how I'm going to finish my films. I'm always just praying because we never know how we're going to finish them. Like The Prodigal, I finished all the pre-production, and I didn't know what to do with it. And I prayed. I said, God, is there a way? And it was like the next week, literally, a friend of mine he was an old friend from Taiwan, and he called. He said, look, Todd, I'm starting a new studio. All of our people are really experienced, but we don't have something that's ours, do you have a short film we could work on? And I said, well, yes, I do. So he looked at it, and a week later he called. He goes, it's a Bible story. And I said, yeah. He goes, okay. So I went down to Indonesia for like a month and a half, and we animated it. And so I was very fortunate, very blessed with that. And all the Pumpkin of Nightfire was one I did. That's how I first arrived in Thailand. It was, again, a studio that wanted to. They said, look, we do animation, but we don't know how to do storyboards and design. If you'll teach us, we'll make a film for you. And so that's how that came about. So I moved to Thailand, and then 6 months, I was going to stay there 6 months. It ended up being 20 years. So, it just. And then,
seems like the animation industry is really doing well over there.
It is all over Asia. It's really grown. There wasn't anything 20-25 years ago, but in Thailand specifically, a little bit. But now they're doing great stuff. It's amazing. So.
Did you have to learn the language as well?
Yeah, I speak okay. The technical stuff is in English still, but conversational stuff is in Thai. Yeah.
Okay.
Are you Thai?
I mean, I don't know the language, but I was like, that's a little worrisome because I want to go to Japan for my work, but I know no Japanese.
Well, and I didn't when I went over, but if you're immersed in it, 6 months. After 6 months, you're able to get by and communicate.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't take long, especially you have no crutch. You know, you don't have like translators all around you all the time. You know.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
And do you have any more questions, Gloria? I'll look through mine, see if there's one I definitely want to ask.
No, go ahead.
So what personally motivates you to make art? Because I thought I saw something somewhere where you said, I can't remember, but you had something on your Discord profile that kind of described your goal in life.
Oh,
for art.
yeah. What did I don't even know what I said there. Because one of the things one of the things that drives me is my faith a lot of times, and exploring my faith, and especially as more people in my life are passing away and I'm getting older, you know, it's just, and especially with the 21 martyrs. The story is a true story about 21 Egyptian migrant workers that were killed in Libya for their faith by ISIS. And so when I went to Egypt to just research the story, you know, I was eating lunch and these women were serving me and all these things. And then I realized these were the widows of the men that had died and their children. And it was like, we formed this really, I don't know if you call it a bond or what, but just this respect and just exploring what made these guys tick, you know, what made them who they were and how they could be so faithful to, so strong, you know, in their belief of something. And last week I was in Egypt and I showed it to a group of Muslims, which was very interesting. And it was an amazing time. They were so open and warm, and because I didn't know, you know, it's not an anti-Muslim film at all. It's sort of an anti-extremist film. And because the same is true of Christians in America, right? We have KKK, we have politicians that say they're following a certain faith, but they're not really, right? Not that I can't judge that, but just this beautiful, and I'm making the film for healing because there is a lot of rift there. And it was just it was an amazing time, really. So we're hoping to finish by the end of the year, and then we'll premiere in Egypt, hopefully in February. I hope so. Yeah.
Yeah.
But different films have different motivations. Yeah.
So it depends on the film. But
well,
how do you approach someone for like when their story inspires you and you want to learn more about them, because that's sensitive.
It is
in some ways.
Most people, you know, I think most people are open and to having their story told. I mean, there's been a few cases where, like, I had a friend who was involved in the Japanese American incarceration in World War II. And, you know, he was born and grew up in America. He was Japanese American, but he was put in the internment camps, in the concentration camps in Topaz, Utah. And so his story was amazing because a lot of the stuff, he saw that the children weren't in prison exactly, but they were depressed and they were behind bars, basically, these barbed wire fences. So he came up with stuff for the kids to do. You know, games and crafts and all these different things with his group. And then later, after, you know, he got out, but the only place he could get work was at a YMCA in a black neighborhood in San Francisco. So he began to implement, he saw that even though there was no bars, that these children were still kind of in a prison. They were still depressed in these neighborhoods. So with the YMCA, he came up with all these projects and things. And then it went national. You know, he got, I think it was Yamaha, to donate, I don't know how many thousands and thousands of these mini motorcycles to help the kids and just all these things. And just a beautiful man. He died, he was 103. He died just a few years ago. And, but his family was like not so sure they wanted to go forward, even though, you know, I showed them the artwork and I told them how I was going to tell the story. And I'd actually been working with him on it for about 10 years, just the story. And we became friends, and we just every once in a while I'd visit him and we'd talk and things like that. But you know, it's always like, it's a personal story for them, and so they weren't so sure they wanted to hand that over to someone else, if that makes sense. So
Yeah,
it happens.
makes sense.
But it's only the one time, you know, that's happened actually.
Mm-hmm. But did they hand over the story? I'm not sure which.
Well, we're talking about it. You know, these films, each of these shorts takes like 21 Martyrs. I've been on it for 3 years. And it's just my weekends and nights sometimes whenever I have time. So it's not my job. So these little short films are just therapy mostly. You know, you're talking about inspiration. The first film was when Maurice died. So that was motivated by him. The second film was when my father died. So that was therapy. That was my angry film. It was called Escape of the Gingerbread Man. I made that one partially when I was in Ireland. But anyway, all those things are driven by strong emotions, you know. And since my son has been born, he's 8 now. And so the types of stories that I want to tell and the types of things I'm interested in have shifted a little bit. I'm at a much happier place in my life. So the stories I'm telling are kind of depressing. I don't know why that is. And the ones before were much more comedy based, you know, much more light and fun. And so I don't know why that is, but it's just
maybe you can reflect the lessons out of the sad stories a bit better now. If that's
maybe as I'm older. But also, if you were having a hard life and telling a hard story, maybe it would be too much. But my son brings so much joy that it's, you know, I get to escape with him, you know. So
yeah, and I don't want to keep you here too long, because I know that we've hit the end point for this meeting. But do you have any closing questions, Poria? So I don't give you the chance. You know, I want to be able to give you the chance to ask one if you want to.
No, thank you. Right now, I just like got emotional through the whole thing that you just saw, and I'm Iranian American, and so what is happening over there, it just
it's hard.
Yeah,
I've got a lot of friends in Tehran, and yeah, it's a tough time. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
I'm really fascinated. I'm by the stories you tell, and just amazing what you put into them. So I think that I'm definitely going to walk out of this reframing the way I look at my work, because it's gotten a little dull lately. But
live life. That's the best. That's the best way to become a great designer, I think, or a writer, or whatever it is. Yeah.
You'll probably see Poria's work soon, because he's finishing a game, which is actually seems
is
to be
this going to come out?
I'm not sure when. Did you have a deadline for that, Poria?
Well, I mean, we're aiming to finish our first playable like a level by end of December.
Awesome.
So, but we will see how much polish it needs and how the quality will be there.
It's looking absolutely
good luck.
fantastic, like a movie. Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
That's awesome. That's awesome. You guys are doing this, and I love what this club is a great idea. It's great that you're able to share and feed each other. Really, I mean, inspire each other, right? So that's great.
Mm-hmm. I don't know about this club, but I know that our school is making a lot of effort for the program, at least.
Okay.
And there's a lot of fantastic artists, so I'd love to share this recording with my teacher, because I know that when she sees it, she might ask to talk to you, because she is trying to grow her department to be one of the first 4-year degrees, like within. It's a very specific part of the program, but I think she'd love to hear from people.
Yeah, it's exciting because it's new, right? It's cutting edge. It's with the animation school in Denmark too. They've got a new gaming program as well, and it's exciting to see what people are doing and bringing in new ideas and new points of view. So yeah.
I love if you ever do create something else within the game industry. We'd love to see it.
Sure. I hope so too. I mean, it's all interesting stuff. So it's all related, right? So.
All right. We are going to get kicked out soon again, so
Okay, no worries.
probably a good place to end.
Okay.
But
Well,
thank you so much for coming to talk to
And
us.
thank you for having me. It's awesome. And thank you, Chris Merritt, wherever you are, for inviting me.
His son is not here yet
Yeah,
right now,
that's-
but
that's okay. It's
yeah.
okay. I'll tell him it was amazing, and it, he can't see it. So
I'll record it, so if he wants to watch it.
yeah, Chris, go way back. His dad's fun. We're good friends. So cool. Well, thank you again for having me, and yeah, good luck with everything.
Thank you
Thank
for your
you.
time.
No worries. Okay, take care. Bye.